Okay, hi everyone. If you can see us, hear us, let us know in the comments. That way we know that there's audio or there's no issues with the video. Welcome everyone. I'm super excited about this interview and about our guest today. And please, before I forget, because I tend to forget about a lot of things when I'm going live and I get so into the topic, don't forget to introduce yourself in the comments, say hi to us. Tell us where you're watching from. We have lots of people from all over the world, and I get super excited when I get to see like where you're watching from. And just tell us your name, say hi, say something. Today we have a really, really interesting interview, and I can't wait to dig into this because this is stuff that I think for most of us in the retreat leader community is something that we need more clarity around. So today I have Jen from WeTravel. She's going to be talking to us about COVID-19 and how it has affected the retreat leader industry, the travel industry, and also she will be going into some details about some resources that we have available specifically in the United States, in the US, and how we can access those. So today's topic is all about the impact of COVID-19 on the retreat leader industry, specifically some research that WeTravel is conducting right now, so they can give us some insight into that, and then we'll go into some amazing information on the resources available, specifically in the United States. Even if you're watching from somewhere else, though, there are a lot of countries around Europe that are having similar or not similar, but specific resources available to their people. So I know New Zealand, the UK, Germany. So it's always good to hear what everybody else is doing in other places and see what resources you have available to you. So without further ado, I know we're a little bit early, but I think we can start the introduction. Hi, Jen, and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's an honor, a pleasure to have you. We've been friends for a while. We co-created an ebook a while ago, and I'm really excited to have you on today. Say hi and just introduce yourself. Tell us, who you are, what you do at WeTravel.
Yeah, thank you, Paloma. It's great to be here. We go way back, almost to the beginning of my time at WeTravel. I have been there since 2016, early in the year. I actually came from a totally different background of like doing finance strategy, and I was a yoga teacher during grad school thereafter. And when I got out of grad school, I loved teaching dearly, but I realized that my brain was just a little bit more suited towards the business side of the yoga and the wellness world. And so found my way into the family at WeTravel, and my role there is the head of the wellness part of the business. So retreats and trainings are kind of what we're mainly looking at in my portion of the business. And so, yeah, I do a lot of marketing stuff, but I love educational based content. I love like what we're doing right here, right now, which is just connecting with other retreat leaders, having a dialogue kind of about what this experience is like for all of us, and hopefully how we're going to be able to navigate out of it together and come out stronger on the other side. So that's me. Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me here.
Thanks so much for taking some time to do this. I know you've been busy over there at WeTravel, trying to help people through this process as best as we can. I think all of us who help retreat leaders and have done this in the past, we are trying to show up and see what we can do to help, although we've never navigated anything like this before, and it kind of hit us all really fast. I think we're all trying to see where we can show up and support each other, and that's what matters. So I'm really glad that you could take this time and help us in this community, in the Retreat Leader Collective, show up and do this. By the way, if you don't know me, I always forget, but I'm Paloma Neuman, and I'm the host of the Retreat Leader Collective. I always forget to introduce myself. It's like I jump straight in. So let's dive into our content today. So we are going to talk first about what WeTravel has been doing as far as the research and survey specifically around COVID-19 and how it has impacted the retreat leader industry globally, because I think you guys serve a lot of people around the world. So you've been able to see a little bits and pieces of different regions in the world. But before we dive in, Jen, you will post a link to all of the resources we mentioned here. So don't forget to come back to this video. After this video, we'll post the link in the comments, and that's going to give you direct access to a lot of resources that we're going to talk about today. So don't forget to go back to that if you want those. By the way, thanks, Corey, for watching. Corey's here. Sheila's here. Who else? Lisa's here. Hi, Carla's here. So thanks so much for watching, for saying hi. If you're watching this video, say hi. Don't forget to introduce yourself. Tell us where you're watching from. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about the research you've been doing and conducting, and tell us just what have you been doing over at WeTravel to kind of get a good idea of what's going on with the retreat leader industry.
Yeah, so as soon as it sort of hit, we realized we're sitting in a pretty good place as kind of a bookings and registrations platform for retreats to get a pulse on what kind of decrease in activities happening, what kind of things are happening around reschedules, postponements, what are people doing to kind of work things out with their participants. And so about 2 weeks ago, we have, thousands of clients, our own clients around the world who sit in the position of being the retreat organizer. And so sort of our crystal ball to look into the future, like what are you planning? What's going on in your world? And then wrap that all up into hopefully a pretty interesting study of where we've been and where we're going as we go through these crazy COVID-19 times. So we opened up that, as I said, to I think about 3,000 of our clients in the first week or so. The figures that I'm going to speak from, we had 130 respondents really from all the way around the world. So it's a pretty diverse set of respondents that we're looking at. Hopefully this whole exercise helps us, as individuals figure out what our game plan is. And also just, it loops into the funding question as well, because the more we can show to industry associations like the GWI, Yoga Alliance, other big bodies that we're really getting impacted, hopefully those organizations are also in a position to appeal to the government saying this is a sector that's been hardly hit and we need to make sure appropriate resources are in place to help us bounce back.
And I think the travel industry, I mean, that was the first industry that got hit, or most immediately got hit by COVID-19, because we had to close down, borders and all these things that happened right in the beginning. But I think because the retreat industry is a subset of that, not a lot of people know that much about it. So it's really important to put some light into it. So I really appreciate that WeTravel is taking that on, of like doing that research that's needed and having some data on how this is affecting the retreat leaders around the world. Like what is really happening with that, right? Besides just the travel industry, what's really going on with our little community of retreat leaders. So what have you seen as far as, when did you first see, when did this impact start? Like when did you first see this hitting retreat leaders? Especially, I don't know, because globally it has happened in phases. So I'm interested in how you've seen this develop.
Yeah. And I apologize if anyone out there sees me looking down. I've got a lot of facts.
we have all, yeah.
I don't have, my mind is not capable of keeping them all. So if I'm looking down at my notes, that's what's happening.
And I'm looking at the comments as well, by the way. So if I'm looking this way, it's like, I want to make sure I'm saying hi to everybody.
Yeah, likewise. Well, so I mentioned that we have about the numbers I'm reporting on are from about 130 respondents worldwide. Pretty much people started feeling this like on the order of 30% as early as February. So that was not sort of my personal experience to be super personally impacted that early, but thereafter, obviously we see through the month of March, by early March, it was like up to 53% additional. And there were only 15% by late March that didn't feel they'd been impacted. So we're seeing that in some places around the globe, it was earlier, at least than here in the US. I think we went into full sort of COVID mode a bit later than February, certainly. But people started to unwind their travel plans, and certainly by early March, the vast majority of them were starting to be reconsidered or right out unwound from that point forward. And virtually nobody has reported not being affected at this point. So
virtually nobody. That's yeah. So what did you see what was the reaction? Like, how did you see that unfold? Did most people want to do cancellations, rescheduling? Did you guys get a lot of questions around what to do?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, and we, that could be like a topic for a whole nother topic, but our team, sits in the position okay, well, we can advise on topics like best practices for what are your terms and conditions, what, how do you work within those to come up with a solution that's going to, hopefully you as a retreat leader don't end up with a ton of costs out of your pocket, but you're able to refund people, you're able to work out deals with your vendors and partners. But then the question is, do you outright cancel as early as possible? Do you wait and see? Do you decide to postpone? If so, when? So those are some big questions that we wanted to get at, like what are people actually doing? Whether that's in line with the best practices that we sort of have shared and we think are our best practices, or are people finding all kinds of ways to handle it? And so we asked the question, what percentage of your offerings have been canceled so far? To that question, 17% of respondents said less than 10%, 14% said between 10 and 25, 21% between 25 and 50, 20 were between 50 and 75%, and then the remaining 30, basically everything they have going on has been canceled. So as you can see, that's kind of, you got people like all the way, there's a lot of variability there, and that probably is reflective of the time of year that their next offering was coming up, the geography it was in, whether it was local or halfway around the world in East Asia, for example.
Right.
And the most common reasons people gave for flat out canceling were governmental travel restrictions, actually personal fears, both on the part of the retreat leader and their guests. And then kind of a tertiary one was just that as the economic impact began to be felt by people, people were concerned that, the cost of going on retreat for these groups just maybe wasn't going to be feasible in this time frame, or there's too much economic uncertainty to make people feel good about it. So yeah, lots of different considerations.
Did you ask any questions about, or have you seen any trends as far as like how people reacted right in the beginning, where it was kind of an immediate, like I have to kind of pause and see what's going to happen, and then now where I think a lot of us in many countries in Europe are hitting their apex and coming down the other side of this, and the United States is getting close to that point. Are we seeing a different reaction from the beginning to what's happening now? And what are you seeing? Like, are people wanting to cancel more or postpone, or are they rescheduling? Or are they not? Like what do you see unfolding as far as long term now?
Yeah, so I can speak to this a bit more anecdotally because it wasn't exactly
Right.
as much in our survey, but at the beginning, I think what we all consume in the media, the chatter was at first like, oh, how big of a deal is this really going to be? The first countries that were the fastest movers in terms of putting travel restrictions and et cetera in place, people in those geographies, I think, tended to get the picture kind of more fully right up front and perhaps took more drastic actions quicker. And I think, again, to completely stereotype or anecdotalize the US, it was sort of like we came a bit more slowly into realizing how the depth and breadth of the situation. So there are a lot of people that were more in the let's wait and see camp for probably a couple weeks longer on average. And at this point, I don't think anyone really has their eyes shut to what the reality of the pandemic is, but we'll get to it later in terms of kind of the optimism and forward-looking things. There are a cohort of people that very much realize the severity of what's going on now, but I would say are optimistic that we've done all the things that we can to really slow the pandemic, and as a result, they're optimistic that pent-up travel demand and all this stuff will bounce back, quicker than maybe others are expecting. So it's down to like the media you consume, the country you live in, and then also just if you are generally a more optimistic person or a little more anxious about the situation and think it might be more protracted. So
I love all the factors that you're bringing into play here to make these decisions that are so important, in our businesses. And I feel the same way. And I'm usually the person who tends to be a little bit more anxious and have that tendency of want to know exactly what's going to happen. If I don't have control, I tend to be really proactive and plan everything like as much as I can.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of, like, in the beginning, I saw a lot of people feeling holding back a little bit to having to cancel or postpone or reschedule anything. And I was really inside afraid of like, okay, well, if we don't do this soon enough, there's going to be repercussions. And the sooner you tell your clients that there's going to be a postponement, the better it is for them to be able to, feel just in general, feel more safe that they're taken care of, they're, that you're on top of things. So I think I've seen like all these different reactions to it as well in the group. And I feel like now we're heading more toward the long-term vision of what's going to happen in 6 months and 9 months, not what's going to happen in 3 months, because most of us feel like it's not just going to bounce back that fast. What are you guys seeing over there as far as when there's going to be some return to normalcy as far as the travel industry? And maybe you don't have any specific data on that either, but did you ask any questions on that as well?
Yeah, we did. So in terms of gauging sort of optimism about the future, we two different questions we asked. One was sort of on business outlook and how long it will take the industry to sort of normalize. And in that question, we had 27% of respondents say that they basically weren't sure if their business outlook would be positive or negative in the first half of next year. 22% said they were positive by the time we reached the first half of 2021. 17% their outlook for that period is fair. 20% said somewhat negative, and 14% say negative. So got a slight tinge towards positive, but it's really pretty. If you ask, if you ask 5 people, you might get 5 different responses. So it's relatively spread out. And again, because this is a worldwide survey, I'm sure it's somewhat circumstantial, and also someone, like we were just saying, down to people's individual psychology too.
Yeah. And I think also the fact that we just don't know, right?
Yeah.
Not a lot of answers, because we tend to look toward our governments or the people who have expertise in these areas and in the pandemic, infectious disease, and they are openly saying that they don't know a lot of these answers to these questions. So they don't know when things can reopen up, and so we just don't have the answers because we're not seeing them come from the people that we usually rely upon to get these answers from, right? So that's why you get a lot of it, all over the board, across the board, different answers. I feel like it's really there's the two polarized ones, and then there's lots of people in the middle as well.
Yeah, and then the second piece that we looked at was just kind of like, when do you think the recovery will come, for better or worse, whether you have a positive or out, just how long is this going to last? And so 60% of respondents there said within a year they think the industry will recover, which is good. And that was pretty evenly split between the optimists who were like 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, 9 to 12 was kind of evenly split there. And then for the remaining 25% who said we don't think it's going to, remaining 25% who said we don't think it's going to come back in a year, again about half 12 to 18 months, and then half of that cohort more than 18 months. And then those numbers don't add up to 100 because there's a nice hefty slice of the pie that we're just not sure.
Yeah. Which is so interesting. So tell me something, how are people managing these postponements and rescheduling, and in that comes in that sense also, how are they managing refunds? So how does refunds come into this? Are people postponing, canceling? What do you see more of in your community or in the survey?
Yeah, so I think the survey kind of reaffirms, I think, what I would have guessed anecdotally, is that people are trying to reschedule whenever possible, just because they've got all these plans sort of baked in, and if they're able to push, generally that's a good outcome for all parties involved, because the retreat will still happen, but it maybe just will happen on a slightly different, better moment for it to happen. However, because we're touching on how uncertain all of this is, so a very strong majority of people do have plans to reschedule, but a majority of those, or actually no, sorry, not a majority, but nearly half, high 40% say that they haven't yet taken any definitive action towards the reschedule because, and again, I'm inferring from kind of what I would know anecdotally, I think that they feel like, well, gee, is fall realistic, or is that just totally not realistic? And I don't want to postpone it maybe a full year out, but anything inside that, I'm just not sure. And we don't know about global travel. I think, lots of people are working towards postponement rather than flat out cancellation.
Are they then doing no dates? So they're saying we're postponing it, but we don't have dates yet. Is that kind of the go-to?
Yeah. I mean, there's a different models of how it's being communicated or whatever, but yeah, generally kind of made the decision to postpone, don't have all of the data we need in hand to actually get, plane tickets or finalize contract with our retreat center or whatever, but the wheels are sort of turning towards that hopefully eventual resolution. They're just not quite there yet.
What do you recommend in that case? Is that an email that you send out, or do you communicate it one by one with each of your clients? Or maybe that depends on the retreat leader. But what would be one great way to communicate? We don't have a date yet, but we're postponing. That we don't want to give you your refund because it's happening. So how do you kind of communicate that?
I mean, I think if your retreat group is not like ridiculously large, 250 people or something, because we do support some really large retreats, but if it's feasible to call and have, personal, whatever is the preferred form of communication, but something personal, person to person with each, ideally over the phone, so you can actually talk it out and explain to them kind of what's going on. Just be very transparent. I mean, I think luckily most everybody knows that this is just a totally unprecedented situation. While they might be disappointed that they're not going to get their vacation or retreat experience on the timeline that they originally anticipated, it's obviously sort of outside of all of our control. And I think people have we did I can give you some numbers like we did look at how generally are these underlying participants with how the retreat leaders have been handling it, and I would say it pretty much mirrors kind of people doing best practices. So we looked at, and I will give you all these numbers, but we looked at are you refunding totally? 54% are refunding totally. 36 are giving credit towards future offerings. 24 are still negotiating. 14% are giving a refund minus a small fee. And only 7% are not giving any refunds at all due to the fact that their terms and conditions specifically say that a scenario like this is not grounds for a refund. So that's the split, mostly refunds. And second to that, credits. We think credits are great just because it, again, keeps people hopefully going on their retreat, and hopefully it's a great experience. And then clients, similarly, like 49% say their clients are happy, 11% only say that they're unhappy, 18% don't feel sure that they know, and yes. So again, there's that slice of the pie.
You can find out in that case, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is, I think that's again back to your, question or comment about like, how do we think about what the best way to handle all this is? Transparency, proactive communication, communicating early, even if you don't have all of the pieces to communicate, just be honest about what you know and what you don't know. And I think, anyone who's going through this today knows that
that's the best
flexibility is required. Yeah.
The best advice is to, even if you don't have the answers, to take action anyways. It's kind of like if we mirror this with the government or, the governments around the world, we can see the different responses they have all had depending on where you live. Yeah. And I think the more proactive and more action taker type of government you have, the better you feel as a citizen to know that, okay, you don't have all the answers, but you're taking action. You're trying to do your best in this case. Same thing goes for you as a retreat leader. You're needing to really step up, even if you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or in 6 weeks or in 6 months, right? So the worst case scenario here is not to know anything, not to know how anybody's feeling, because that means you haven't reached out to anybody and you're kind of keeping quiet, and that's not a good thing. I think in general, the advice is what you were saying, just even if you don't have the answer, show up for them, reach out to every person that is in your, if you can, individually, if not, send emails, which is another great way to communicate, and make sure that you're touching every person that has signed up for any of your retreats and that's kind of in the limbo waiting to hear what's going to happen. Okay. Yeah. How are people managing refunds? Like if they are refunding, how do they do this? Because this is a question I get a lot. Like, should I refund? Some people ask specifically to get the refund. So what do you do in that case, even if you have in your terms and conditions, that clause that says that you don't offer refunds? What do you do in that case?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's very much a personal call, because if you have the legal two legs to stand on to not return the money and you're facing potential bankruptcy on one side of the spectrum, and it just, there's no other way forward and it's going to be difficult with clients, that's hopefully like the minority of situations. In terms of what do we recommend people do, I think one thing, all kind of moral ethical questions aside, is one really good just piece of objective consideration to put into this is that when you as a retreat leader take money from prospective clients and then aren't able to deliver a service, you have other partners and vendors like your retreat center, like any transportation or food providers. You have these vendors and partners that you also potentially have a contract with, where you're going to owe them money down the line. But if you think about it, if you think about this all unwinding, you've taken money in from participants that the service has not been provided to them. So before, people have been tempted to sort of like glue things together and like try to keep everything from totally falling apart. And so they really want to pay their vendors on the same schedule as they had previously had. But I would say really think about your participants first. And if you're wanting or feeling it's right to make sure that they get their money back, treat them as kind of the first place that your money goes back, as opposed to going out to keep trying to make this event that may or may not happen. You're just kind of potentially digging yourself into a bigger and bigger situation financially. So that's what I would say. If you do feel like it's either the right thing to do or your terms and conditions say that you'll give the money back, the first thing is you have to have the money sitting there. So that's kind of maybe the how to think about where the money's all coming in from and going out to, and in what order is it fair to pay whom back first. Your participants, I think, should come first.
And I think there could be a way to negotiate these things as well, because a lot of people, like you said, may not have all this money in the bank. Maybe you receive deposits from your clients and then you paid a deposit to your venue, right? Let's say that usually happens right in the beginning when you're planning a retreat, the few first months. If that's the case and you're not getting refunded from your venue, you can start the conversation with your venue and ask them for a refund and say, borders are closed, travel is restricted. Under some laws, if not most, they should refund you as a venue, because you cannot get there, so they can't receive you, right? And so if you negotiate with your venue first, then you may be able to receive that money back. Even if that trickles down in a couple of weeks or months, you can negotiate then with your clients that want a refund and say, I will refund you. Can we do a payment plan? Because this is exactly what's happening. Again, going back to transparency,
exactly.
how to be able to communicate with everybody and do a lot of negotiations so everyone's happy. And I love the idea that you said, Jen, just highlighting that your clients are first and making sure that they are taken care of is kind of your first line there.
Yeah. So, and then the actual, and it can be a nightmare doing all of these refunds and processing it. If with our company, it's kind of built into the software platform, but I know a lot of the people that do things other ways, and they're like mailing checks or doing, Zelle or Venmo or whatever, just trying to figure out how to get it done. So unfortunately it means like some extra accounting work and some extra steps, but hopefully that's not the most difficult thing you're dealing with.
You get only a couple of people who want a refund, and most people are okay with you kind of giving them a credit or rolling over to the next retreat or postponing a retreat. So always like having that positive mindset. I think that's where the positive mindset really helps, is like understanding like, if I can solve this, I just have to be really mindful of how I reach out to people, how I communicate with them, and how I try to negotiate with every party involved so that everyone's happy. Obviously venues have been greatly impacted by this, their hotel industry. And so I have a lot of hearts going out to them, because I know how much they matter in our industry and how much it matters that we have these retreat centers here when this is all over. So hopefully we can all kind of work together to keep this afloat. That's kind of the main thing, right? So I think we've kind of covered a lot of these things. Anything else in this area of the impact of the survey that you guys did that you want to highlight, or Anything else that pops into your mind right now about this?
Oh, that last point you made is actually a really good segue on, okay, like how do we all navigate through this together so that we come out on the other side and have, surviving and hopefully ultimately thriving businesses. Yeah, so that's basically what programs are out there, through the government. And as you alluded to in the beginning of the call, this is going to be mostly US centric. There are very similar programs available in other countries. We're actually working on primers for a lot of the other countries where we have significant numbers of clients. It's just we were able to get this
What
out first. So this is kind of version 1.0. And with the link that will be in the comments, then we'll make sure if you visit that page, there'll be, links.
updates on that? Okay, that's great. So you're going to update as much as you can on other regions of the world where you have a lot of concentration. Okay, that's great to hear. So that link will go in the comments right after the live video. And also, if I have lots of comments here. Hi, Sheila. She says the CEO of hospitality in Curacao projects 12 to 18 months before recovery. They're saying that in Curacao, there's going to be, or in the Caribbean, 12 to 18 months before there's going to be a total recovery. I think a lot of people have been hearing that time frame. So a year to a year and a half before we see a total going back to normalcy. That doesn't mean, again, we've had these conversations in the group, that doesn't mean that you cannot plan retreats. They may just be local, they may just be different, right? So it's about rethinking and strategizing what your business looks like. So as a segue, like what you just said, Jen, let's talk about what's happening in the United States as far as what resource we have available to small businesses in our industry, to sole proprietors, to contractors, yoga teachers, all these people that are in this group, waiting to understand, like, because there are a lot of confusing facts out there. I'll be honest. You can go in, if you go into these sites, just straight into these sites, you can't really tell if you're going to qualify for any of these things. So it's good to kind of get some idea of, or some information on who's qualifying for this. So maybe you can just tell us what the CARES Act is, which is that's the second one that the U.S. Congress passed, right?
They've been calling them phases, and actually the information I have is relative to the phase 3.
Phase 3, okay.
And I believe, don't quote me, I think that went into law on March 27th. So most of what I'm speaking to pertains to that fresh of information. With any updates that that are large and important, but
so this
one thing
as of today, April 14th, and there's going to be some updates on that, obviously.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So what I was going to say is two things. This is hopefully a really helpful framework for understanding the programs that are out there and who they pertain to. And again, in the link, there's some goes much more granular than I think will be interesting to talk into in the call today, but once you're to the point of okay, this program sounds right, how do I decide if I'm actually eligible? Doing more reading in the resources that I'll share. And also if you have a tax or attorney that you work with, it might be a good time to pick up the phone and call that person in connection with the process, just because it might save you a lot of potentially barking up the wrong tree or going slightly wrong. But hopefully this is a good big picture and a place to jump off from, because I'd say the one common theme is most of these programs have a finite number of resources, and a lot of them are sort of first come, first serve. So not to say as soon as this Facebook Live wraps up, go at it, but but as soon as practical, if this stuff seems like it's going to be relevant to your business, definitely time to dig in. So the CARES Act is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. It's in its entirety, it's a $2 trillion program, basically just with the broad purpose of providing essential relief to the U.S. economy. And then the cohorts that are helped are sort of because there's different sub-programs, but local businesses that are sort of local small employers that need to keep these people employed, businesses big and small that operate in for example the travel industry, in particularly hard hit industries, and then kind of individual families, individual employees, more on the family household level. There's kind of some different programs, but we're going to look broadly through the lens of who we think our audience is. So small wellness businesses, sole proprietors, retreat leaders, and any of these programs I'm going to talk to should kind of speak to all those folks.
Yeah, so give us a little rundown of so there's 2 or 3 of these different sources of funding, and how does that apply to retreat leaders, yoga teachers, wellness professionals, small companies in the wellness and travel industry?
Yeah, well, I would say those cohorts I spoke to, that you can go out and read materials that are related to each of them, but kind of across the board, one of the most exciting, biggest, most promising programs for our purposes is the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. It's also known as Small Business Interruption Loans, if you've heard that that nomenclature instead. So it's a $349 billion loan program, and it applies to small businesses, it applies to self-employed individuals, independent contractors, all of those folks, anyone impacted by the coronavirus in some way. So it's pretty broad.
And it doesn't matter if you're a independent contractor or sole proprietor. You don't need to be an LLC or you can be a sole proprietor. Okay.
Yes, yeah. So parties can borrow to do payroll for employee salaries. Qualified expenses are like mortgage payments, rent, utilities, interest on loans that you have outstanding. To be eligible, you generally have to employ fewer than 500 people, which I think that's most of us here. And then there are some industry-based size standards, but again, since truly most of us are truly small business owners, if not kind of individual proprietors, definitely on the small side meet that criteria. So if you do meet the requirements, and again, in the resources, there'll be quite a bit of more information about all the requirements, but if you meet them, you can qualify for a loan of up to $10 million. And the amount that you get is generally, if you've been in business a while, it's 2.5 times the average total monthly payroll for the year leading up to the loan. Pay yourself if you're a sole proprietor. If you haven't been in business that long, they can also use the 2 months of January and February 2020 to establish the same formula, but that's how they calculate what you're eligible for.
Do they calculate this based on your tax returns?
Yes, I believe so. Or your payroll.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, there's kind of the documentation you need and stuff. Would it be your payroll stub, or would it be whatever it was? Yeah. I don't have all that.
This is fairly easy to fill out online, not easy.
Yeah.
There's bureaucracy involved in any of these things, but there is an entire online form that you kind of go through to apply for this. My husband actually did this one, and because he has workers on his payroll, so we applied for it. We haven't heard back, so I can give you that update. But there is a set of steps, and it's a bit of a process, but it's all online. So that's the good news on that one.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can do the paperwork way as well if you wanted to send in a bunch of paperwork, but there is a way to kind of prompt this all online.
Yeah, I mean, and then just the rough process is like step 1, figure out your eligibility. That could be, because there's new information coming out every day. And as you said, some of the government websites are a little dense or unclear or whatever. So, hopefully resources like what we put together kind of put it into English. So once you do determine you're eligible, the second step would be to get in touch with your bank or a certified SBA loan provider. Or lender, and then there's the paperwork, which I'm not going to go into because it's different for everybody, but you submit the paperwork, you wait, who knows how long, but as more and more of these come in, the longer and longer the queues get, unfortunately. Once you've completed the application, the other thing we'd highlight kind of as a 5th step is just keep your records really clean from the point that you've assembled the paperwork, but as you navigate through the next weeks and months, just keep everything, because the decision will come back at some point, and then it's governmental, so there's definitely a lot of paperwork involved.
I think that in general terms, do this as soon as you can, because there's no damage in actually trying to go through this process. Even if you wouldn't qualify at the end, it's not going to hurt your credit. If you're in the United States, that matters. It's not going to hurt you in any way if you just go in and try to do this, because this could be a way to keep your business afloat for these coming months, right? And like Jen said, the queue is getting longer and longer, unfortunately. I've actually heard of some people in this group that already have gotten their paycheck protection, like Canada has, I think, 70% of your paycheck, and New Zealand has 70 or 75. So those people have already received that. And it's kind of a different process there. For us, we have to go through this process. Jen, I wanted to ask you, did you hear if any of people in your community have been applying for unemployment as well? Is this, again, an alternative thing, or can you do both, or how does that work?
Yes, so they actually, under the CARES Act, what they did for unemployment, there's a ruling that anyone who's self-employed would now be eligible for unemployment benefits. And those benefits they're administered like locally at the state level. So relative to these other programs, which are federal. So yes, you can, if you are an employee and you want to file for unemployment again, they've relaxed the time. I heard in California, at least, that usually you have to have a certain amount of wait period to apply. You can now apply and hopefully get the benefits like a week or so earlier. I heard that on the radio on NPR just recently. So yeah, they're trying to make unemployment, because obviously we've got a lot of folks that are unemployed. So they're trying to make unemployment ready faster for people, and to more people who historically might not have been eligible.
And that includes independent contractors, sole proprietors as well, right? And I think freelancers, I was going to say that.
They characterize it as like anybody who's self-employed, but from my understanding, yeah, all of those types of worker arrangements would fall under self-employed. So yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else do you have? So you mentioned that you can go through these steps for the PPP. That's what it is, right? The PPP. Yeah. And then what do you have anything else as far as resources that you have that you know of, or that people have applied for that they haven't had any luck with? Have you heard of anyone actually getting any of this? That's my question, I guess.
Well, I've heard of a lot of people that are in the process, and that's kind of where they are in terms of like, they're not totally sure how successful they're going to be. But I know from all the research that my team did in putting this together, that's not to say like that, the 100 people we've directly been assisting in this process, they're just maybe a little bit behind. They're a week behind the first kind of cohort to go through it. I would highlight there's also for the SBA programs that are not related to the CARES Act, there is an economic injury disaster loan program. That's actually, the SBA has always had this in place. It's not specific to the coronavirus. So this is one that you should, though, keep in mind that it's sort of this or the PPP funding. You can't necessarily, or you generally would not be able to redeem both programs relief funding. So unless you have an operation where these were like totally two different facets of your operation, you could point to why one made sense for one and one for the other. But probably for most retreat leaders, they would decide which one program or the other worked best. So it's the difference is this type of loan, there's a lien placed against company assets. So this is really more relevant to actual companies rather than sole proprietors. But I think this is it's maybe a bit easier to get. The amounts are smaller. It's up to $2 million, and they have an interest rate of 3.75%, which is, because they're in high demand, because I think that they're relatively easy to get these loans, and the terms are pretty favorable. So just like with the PPP, it's like, okay, get in line. Like there's not an unlimited amount of funds. So the quicker that you're able to act. And then the other nice thing about this program is if you are a business owner and your cash flow is really crazy, they're also, when you apply, allowing you to ask for a $10,000 advance while your case is being reviewed. And if you end up not getting the loan, they forgive the $10,000, so you get to keep it.
Oh wow, that's really great.
Yeah. So yeah.
So we have the PPP, then we have the specific emergency disaster relief fund.
Yeah, EIDL loan program, which is
That's the other one. And then what are there other resources if you don't end up qualifying for any of these That's
Yeah,
the
well, we touched on unemployment, that's one. And then one other thing, just probably people are aware of this, that the income tax filing has been pushed out from April 15th to, I think it's July 15th, is that right?
3 months.
Yeah, April to July in any case. And then there are also a lot of state and local relief programs that are sort of similar, probably on a smaller scale. I don't have any examples to talk to just because everybody
Yeah,
in every different state. But that's another thing. If you click on the link in the primer that we have on our blog, there's a Forbes and an Inc. link that will both take you to like a constantly updated database of these local programs. And if that for some reason failed you, the other place you can go is just on like your state government or your governor's website. And there should be information about these programs there. But I've looked at the Forbes and the Inc. directories, and they seem really robust. So I definitely go there as well.
So don't give up if the first program that you apply to for some reason doesn't pan out, you don't qualify, or you don't hear back. Maybe it's a good idea to keep kind of going down that research rabbit hole and trying to see like what, and like anything else, like the sooner you do this, the better it is because you get in line sooner, but also this may take a while. That's the truth. Like I just mentioned, we haven't heard back from my husband who has done some of this for his payroll protection. And he's in a good position. He can still pay his workers. He hasn't had to lay off anyone, but we're in line because of not knowing exactly what can happen 3 months from now, 2 months from now. So it's good to just have that as a plan B. Let me see if I have a couple of questions here, maybe. Let me see, or it's mostly comments. Benedict, hi, thanks for watching. Who else? I'm really bad at reading comments. Danielle is watching. Natalia is watching. Jesse is watching. Thanks everyone for watching. A question that I have for everyone watching is, have you done any of these, have you done research on this? Have you applied for any of these programs? Have you had any information that you want to share maybe in the comments about how to do this? I feel like we're all in the dark because nobody knows exactly how to do this, but maybe if we can share a little bit about how we went about it, and even if you're watching from somewhere else, and maybe someone in the group from your region that may benefit from hearing what you've done and if it has worked out for you. Jen, any final thoughts on the resources available or any advice that you have for people in general terms about this period and about everything that we're going through?
No, the only other thing that I kind of just had in the back of my mind as another lever to hopefully pull to keep you in a good financial position, and we kind of just informally alluded to it before, but just get on the phone and talk. Like if you have a landlord where you rent space from, or if you have a retreat center contract, or if, any of these people, if you for example, actually, if you have any B2B software that you're using, a lot of like one of the companies that we use, they're basically like, it's one of the software companies we use at WeTravel. We're like, hey, we're really being impacted by this. Would you consider, we made out a gig face, would you consider giving us a discount for the next like year to use this software? And sure enough, they were like, yeah, we have a program in place to do this. So if you're paying any subscription services, see if you can defer some of the payments. And if you're working with anybody, just because in the end of the day, like right now we're all in such uncertain territory that it's like some of these people may want to just keep you as a client, or that, they might want to get paid in part or in time rather than not at all. Yeah. So I think, just be creative about thinking aside from the loan funding where you might be able to, without having to like scale back your operations, where you just might get a break. Like in your utilities companies, I've heard have been extending the ability to pay later. So if you don't ask, you won't know. But there are definitely companies that are kind of leaning into this and trying to help keep their clients.
Yeah, and it is a lot of work, right? To have to reach out to a lot of people, see how you're going to go about this. But at the same time, we have a little bit of extra time right now to get on the phone, to write an email, to write, just I think about this as a boat, and your business being a boat. And right now we're kind of leaking from a little bit of everywhere, right? Financially, in our personal lives as well. So what holes can you plug? A little bit goes a long way. $30 a month can go a long way. So if you can kind of cut down on those expenses or defer some of those payments, talk to your bank about some of these things. Our bank, for example, it's a community bank, They literally said, you don't need to do anything. You're not paying anything for the next, any of your loans, like car loans and stuff we have with them, for 3 months. So just those little things help so much, because they may be the smaller expenses, not the big ones, but they help, right? And so maybe we're not thinking about that in our business, but the little things like the email marketing, the service provider, the website, all these little things that we pay, we may be able to do something about these, just to keep a little bit of that cash flow. Let's finish on a positive note, because I know that this is stressful. Anything that has to do with trying to get financing, and it's just not an easy process. That's the truth. It just takes a while. We just don't know how to do it. So hopefully this has been a little bit helpful for you. Like we've kind of covered the big picture, like Jen said in the beginning, and she has a lot more resources. So I really want you to go click on that link that we're going to share in the comments, that she's going to share in the comments. But other than that, other than doing your research, let's finish on a positive note of what makes you hopeful about the future in the retreat leader industry, in the retreat industry, in the travel industry. What do you see as something that's hopeful? What do you see as something that could come out of this in a positive way? Or how can we come out of it in a positive way? Maybe that's the question.
Well, I even before we come out of it, one thing that's been so inspiring is just the way that this community has been able to embrace social distancing and being responsible, yet still staying really connected. So we're seeing tons of online retreats pop up, online wellness programming in general that is offered discount basis or for free. We've got a client who does a yoga teacher training program that was destination based. They're doing it all online this year. They're also making the tuition free for anybody who got sent back home from the Peace Corps this year if they want to go through yoga teacher training. And heard stories about other retreat leaders like focusing really on serving underserved populations, like people that are homebound because they're elderly, or pregnant women that are navigating this really scary time, and giving them prenatal yoga, just like really standing up and being creative about how they can help their broader community and world in a time where we all need each other's support so much. So for right now, that's what keeps me, like, times are tough. It's not like I'm super excited every single day when I wake up that it's going to be an awesome day, but when I hear stuff like this, I'm just like, oh, people have an amazing capacity to like be flexible and do things that are hard. And I think all of the pent up wanderlust that we have accumulated by being inside for a month or so now, I do think that once the world normalizes in terms of the pandemic peaking and receding, I do think that people are really gonna love that interpersonal and exploratory nature of going on retreat. And I think that it's gonna come back, and maybe it will be changed and there'll be some things that are different, but that's not all bad. Like, innovation is great. Hopefully our businesses will be stronger. So yeah, I'm pretty optimistic. It's just we have a ways to go before we get there.
Yeah, so let's just keep our eyes on what's positive in all of this, and that what you mentioned, Jen, like community is everything. I've been saying it throughout this time, and we are resilient as human beings. Like, we don't give up. We don't lay down and give up on everything. So I think forgive yourself if you're not doing everything that you possibly can in your business right now. Just do what matters, one step at a time, and we will come out of it. Like, I think that's the message, and it may look a little different, but we will still be here when this is all over. And like you said, Jen, people are going to want to travel again, because when have we not wanted to travel? Like, why would that ever go away? So I think that's the big message, and the big message of hope. Thank you so much, Jen, for taking this time, almost 40 minutes out of your day. I know that you're busy, you're a mama, you have lots to do. So thanks so much for taking this time, and please keep sharing your resources in the group. Please post the link in the comments, and then keep sharing as you get updates on any of this stuff so that we can all stay communicated. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Paloma. Yeah, I'll post the link, and then I'll also post a link to that survey. So if anybody in this group wants to weigh in on those surveys, they'll just get, broader, more representative of the world. If you're interested, it's a pretty short survey. So I'll
click on the survey if you see it in the comments, so that you can also be a part of the survey, and we can all kind of get more data on what's going on with all of us as an industry. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks, Danielle. Daniel is watching, Jesse, everyone who watched today. I know I didn't check the comments as much as I usually do, but I just wanted to get this information out. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.